Welcome to Beulah Heights University's Let's Talk About Leadership series, where we aim to put practice with theory by speaking with some of Atlanta's most prominent leaders. I am Dr. Alicia Plant, the Associate Academic Dean here at BHU. Today, we have with us someone who needs no introduction, but she certainly deserves one, Monica Pearson, a media icon. Monica served over 37 years as the news anchor for WSB-TV. First woman, first minority to do so. BHU, please help me welcome Mrs. Monica Pearson.
Thank you.
Monica, it's so wonderful to have you here.
Well, thank you very
one of the
much.
things, as I was reading and thinking and studying about you and all that you have offered us through your years of service in journalism and beyond, was how comfortable we are with calling you Monica.
That's my name.
But how did you become every household's Monica?
By being in their house every day, but more importantly, being in their community, not just as a reporter, but as a volunteer. I read in the Atlanta public school system to first graders for 10 years weekly. By speaking at churches. I've got so many hats for Women's Day programs. I'm ready, okay? I can go with the best mother of the church in my hats. But by speaking at churches, by judging contests, by doing things in the community, that's how people got to know me. Yes, people saw me on television, but you're in a little box, and people have a perception about who you are in that box. But when you're in their school for Career Day, or in their church for Women's Day, or at their school judging a contest, or speaking to a civic organization, then it's like they can touch you, so then you're real, and then you are Monica, and you're not Monica Kaufman Pearson, the woman on television. And to me, that's important because let me tell you, Dr. Plant, what it does, when you go toe-to-toe and eye-to-eye with people and shake their hands and touch them, smile with them and get to know them, eat with them, they call you with story ideas. Because they know you, so they feel like they can trust you. And I tell all my young reporters, when they come to the city, the first thing you need to do, 1, is get a church, 2, find an organization you want to volunteer with, and 3, don't just live in one neighborhood. Live all over the city. By that I mean be visual everywhere. Let people know that you care about where you live. Don't be that person who said, well, I'm just going to make my money here. I'm going to go to clubs. I'm going to have a good time. And people should know me from television. You've got to invest in the community if you want to get to that place where people call you by your first name and think of you as part of their family.
And we do.
And
we
I love
absolutely
that.
do. You're from Louisville, Kentucky, but you can't tell us Atlantans that. Atlanta claims you.
Well, actually, Dr. Plant, I don't tell many people this, but I'll tell you because you're sweet.
Thank you.
I have lived longer in Atlanta than I lived in my hometown.
Oh, wow.
I left Louisville when I was 28 years old. I have been living in Atlanta, Georgia since 1975.
Wow.
So I literally have lived here. I was born in Louisville, but I've made my life and my career here in Georgia.
So we rightfully claim you here in Atlanta.
I really am more Georgian than I am Kentuckian now.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I call myself a bird dog. My bachelor's degree is from the University of Louisville. My master's degree, which I got at the age of 67, is from the University of Georgia.
That's awesome. In 2014?
Yes.
You earned that.
It was so funny. I did it for 2 reasons. I wanted to teach, and after I taught, I went, this isn't for me. I don't have the patience to teach. Don't come to me with a paper that when I put it through the system, it all comes up plagiarized. Don't bring me flowers thinking that's going to make me give you a better grade. I had no patience with people who really didn't want to do the work. So I said, you know what, my best thing to be is a guest lecturer.
It was interesting to me that you earned your journalism degree after you did 37 years on WSB-TV.
Well, my degree says journalism and communications, but what my source area of study was media history. My thesis was on Jefferson Franklin Long, who was Georgia's first black U.S. representative in 1872. And what I did was looked at how he was mediated by the press compared to how Barack Obama, our first African-American president, was mediated. Both of them were biracial children. And it was interesting how the press in 1872, once they learned that Jefferson Franklin Long was really black, how they did the same thing they did to Barack Obama, darkened his skin, made his hair woollier, and referred to him in ways that were not kind. And it was really interesting to look at that history. So even though it's in communications and in journalism, it was really about media studies, how the media has treated the first black U.S. congressman and the first black U.S. president.
Wow. And you even covered that story. You've covered many stories from the late 20th century to the
Yes.
21st, some of the most critical ones, to include the first African-American president.
And then going to Norway for the Nobel Peace Prize when Jimmy Carter won the Nobel Peace Prize, and to cover that, to being in Tokyo when Atlanta was given the Olympic Games. I have had a very wonderful career, but now I'm doing what to me is my bread and butter. I covered news forever, but I like telling stories of people. And so now I'm doing personality interviews again for Peachtree TV. I was happily in retirement. I as of 2022, I've been retired 10 years, but not really retired, because as my husband says, retirement is the only thing I failed at, because I was still doing radio.
Yes.
So I was working radio after I got my degree and after I taught for a year and went, ah. So I did radio. And then I started doing commercials, something that I could never do when I was in news, because you can't do that. And then, I discovered there's a whole new way to make money. I can do voiceover work. And so I'm doing that. And I was really just happy doing radio and voiceover work. But Peachtree TV came to me and said, we'd love for you to do your personality interview show again. So before I did, because I'm very loyal, WSB gave me an opportunity in 1975 to integrate the set, literally as both a female and as a minority. Jocelyn Dorsey was actually the first black woman anchor in the city. But before her, there was Lo Jelks, who in 1968 became the first black reporter in Atlanta. And when he first went on the air, they did not show his face. You only heard his voice, because there was this fear that viewers would turn off this black reporter, but they still put him on the air. Lester Maddox was governor. So it was a very dangerous time when you think about it. There were still demonstrations of the Klan out at Stone Mountain. The city was still trying to find its way in 1968, getting used to integration. So anyway, I'm very loyal. So when they offered me the position, I said, let me at least run it by Channel 2 to see if maybe they would want me to do it. And they said, we don't have space for a monthly show, because my show, Close-Ups at Channel 2, only ran once a quarter. This is a show that runs once a month, the last Sunday in every month. So I was kind of like, oh, do I really want to take this chance? And so I'll be honest with you, it was a hard decision to make, but in the end, it was a good decision to make, because I'm doing what I love to do,
Yeah,
and that is tell
like
people about other people who are doing good in the community, people you may not know. So we have two segments now. There are the names you know, and then you find out about who they really are. And then there are the people you don't know who are making contributions that you should know about. So it's like I get to highlight the rich and famous, and then I get to highlight folk who are really making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, it seems like you're having a lot of fun with it.
I am having a ball. Because it's what I like to do. I've always been curious and nosy as a child. My mother said I would talk to anybody about anything. And I remember when we got our first TV, I guess I was about 9 or 10. And it didn't occur to me that I could do that, because you didn't see us on the air. But I remember when Julia, Diane Carroll, had her first show, a black woman on TV, and it was like, woo! But when I look back, I was always getting prepared for what I do. My degree is in English and philosophy. I had planned to be a teacher. I know, back to teaching again. But one of those flukes. I got a job in a bank. The bank was next door to a newspaper. The newspaper needed a newsroom clerk. I got hired as a newsroom clerk. And then from there, my career developed. And I tell kids all the time, don't be afraid to try something new. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I tell them is, when anybody tells you you can't do something, instead of believing them, turn to them and say, why? Why can't I? What skills do I need to be able to do what I really want to do?
I love that.
And, to me, you got to learn the difference between constructive criticism and destructive criticism. And if that person can't tell you in a positive way the skills you need and how to gain them, then if they're just saying, no, I don't think you can do it, that's destructive. They're tearing you down.
They're absolutely tearing you down.
But the constructive is to say, well, okay, if you really want to know, here's what you need to do. Now, you can't have thin skin. And some of us, when people start telling us what's wrong with us, we want to
we close up and then even become defensive.
Yes. And the point is, if you really want to be who you think you should be, you've got to be open to constructive criticism.
I want to pick up on a special name.
Yeah.
And you've already started talking about her, but can you tell us about
Miss Hattie?
Miss Hattie.
Oh, Miss Hattie, that's my mama. Mama was the first person in my family on both sides to graduate from high school. And would you believe I just learned after she died? Now, mind you, her diploma has been on my wall for years, and Mom died 6 years ago. For some odd reason, in the last couple of years, I looked at that diploma and realized my mother didn't graduate from high school until she was 21. She worked her way through high school. She grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. She lived with my cousin because my grandmother, named Beulah Rose, was very famous for her beer and
Interesting
wine
name.
made
Yes, love
on
it.
Sundays and sold to people on Sundays. She was an entrepreneur. She only had a third grade education. She had moved from Pee Wee Valley, Kentucky with her sisters. The three of them bought 3 houses in Smoketown, where I grew up. My grandmother, Rosie Helena Langford, had 2 children, never married, my mother and my mother's brother. Buster, whose real name was Samuel, is a really sad story. He went off to war and came back with PTSD. Back then, they didn't know what to do with it, so they did what was called a lobotomy, where they removed part of his brain. He was never the same for the rest of his life. My mother looked like my grandmother, very fair. Buster was very brown. And my grandmother used to always say, they had the same father, but Buster and Mama's father didn't believe that my mother was his because she was fair. And my mother grew up saying, and even said it before she died, she said, I don't know who my earthly father is, but I always know who my heavenly father is. And my biggest joy with my mother was doing a story on genetics where we took her, DNA, sent it off, and found out that her side of the family came from the Bamileke people in Senegal. So she was like, in Cameroon, the Bamileke people in Cameroon. She was so excited because all of a sudden she knew where she was from, and that meant so much to her. And I also went to Senegal because my father's side of the family was Senegal. And when I came in to meet the president of Senegal, he looked at me and immediately started speaking French because you put me in a bunch of Senegalese people, I look just like them. Little pea head and everything. But my mother always told me I could be successful. She said, if I finished high school and was the first one in my family to do it, she married a childhood sweetheart. They divorced when I was 4. And at that point, I remember her saying, I don't need welfare because I only have 1 child. People who need welfare have more than 1 child. I can work. And my mother believed very much that all work is good work as long as it's honest work. And she always told me that you do what you have to do to make your money. But make sure it's honest work. All work is good work as long as it's honest work. Other favorite saying of hers that I love is what you do with what you have that makes you what you are.
Yes,
She
love that one.
always said, you know, people will tell you what you can't do, but God created each and every one of us to be a gift to someone else. And what you have to find out is what is your strength, and then build upon that strength. And then once you're successful, take that talent, that gift that you were given, and give it to somebody else. Her favorite saying, you got to reach back, pull up, and push forward. Because again, everything we have is a gift, and gifts are to be given away. My mother was just the best. And even in her 90s, she was still reading. She was still taking people around the senior citizens place, showing them where to go. She was very active.
Yes.
But you know what the most important thing she taught me?
What's that?
She taught me how to die. She taught me how to die, and I'll tell you why. When she discovered that she had a cancer that had literally spread through all her body, the doctor said, we can do surgery, and we can do, and I will never forget my mother looking at him and saying, I'm ready to go home and be with Jesus. Let me go back to my apartment and my friends, and let me enjoy the time I have left. And then all of her friends would come in, the hospice people would come in, I'd go over there to visit her. Oh, that's the other thing. She wouldn't live with us. Even though we fixed an apartment and everything for us, she said, I want to be around people my own age. And she moved out. I thought my husband was going to have a fit because they got up and had breakfast every morning together. They had coffee together. And he said, oh, she's not going to stay.
Wow.
She stayed. But as she was dying, she made it a celebration. And I looked at her and thought, and she would say, there's nothing to fear. And I think that's important because I think a lot of people fear death, but I watched my mother die and I now know there is nothing to fear.
She's such a prize of a representative for you. She's
everything for me.
Wow.
My mom was just a, high school education, but smart as a whip, very giving. We'd buy clothes from Goodwill, and then she turned around and give them back after I outgrew them. Very philanthropic in that way. Church tither, loved to sing. One of these days, I'm going to get around, I keep saying that, I'm 75, I better hurry up and do it. One of these days, I'm going to write a book of just her sayings, because there's a story to go with each one.
And there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn
Her
from it.
other favorite one was, nothing spoils a duck but its bill. Now think about it. A duck is a beautiful bird until quack. It opens its mouth and you go, ooh, that's irritating, it's horrible.
That is the truth.
But it carries over to people. Someone can be absolutely, look one way and they open their mouths and they're completely different. And it goes south, yeah. So I've got all of her, there is one I'd love to tell you.
Please, I would love to hear it.
We're in a chapel, I think I can tell it. I'll clean it up.
Okay.
I used to have a friend that I would always want to go visit. My mother would never let me go to her house. It was always, no, she's got to come over here and visit. You can't go over there. And so one day, I remember I was 13, and I said, I don't understand why I can't go over there. And my mother looked at me and she said, let me tell you, she has had many stuck in her, sticking out of her, stuck in her, she'd look like a porcupine.
Oh my goodness.
And I tell that story to teenage girls. Everyone who touches you leaves a mark on you.
Oh, wow.
And it's important that you don't give away the most precious part of you, your sexuality, your sensibilities, who you are, just because you think that person loves you. People who love you want to protect you.
That's
and
so true.
taking your virginity is not protecting you. But she used to say all the time, I told you, Monty, that's my nickname. If she has as many sticking out of her stuck in her, she'd look like a porcupine.
Wow.
It's very visual. But it helps teenage girls realize how precious they are and how whoever touches you leaves a mark on you. And it is very visible in many ways.
Do you think we are at a deficit of that type of mothering today?
Yes, because we have too many people who are having babies too young. And that's sad when you have teenagers raising babies. I recently, I'll give you a story that still has me very concerned. In December, we were delivering toys to people who needed help through Montlick and Associates, a company I work for, and the Wounded Warrior Project, and the Warrior Alliance Project. And I met this young woman who has a 9-year-old son. And we started talking, and she's been a victim of abuse, almost killed by this man she's been living with. He's in prison right now, waiting trial. And then the more I talked to her, I learned 2 things quickly. She was the first of 7 children in a family. Her mother was 14 when she had her. 3 more men came along to produce more children. She wouldn't tell me, but it was obvious to me from the way she was carrying herself, she had been sexually abused as a child. And that's why she's trying to stay with this man who is abusing her physically and mentally and spiritually. And she has a 9-year-old son who's trying to protect her. When a 9-year-old boy has already learned to use a gun, because his mother's taught him that, because she's afraid this other man, once he gets out of jail, may come back and hurt her. Again, a teenager raising a child and then raising more children right behind that child. Then, too, we have parents who are afraid to be parents. They want to be their child's friend. They may not like me. I don't know how many times I didn't like my mother, but I'm glad, she kept her foot up my behind. She knew where I was going, who I was going with, and would show up. And I was just as bad. I can remember my daughter, who's now 42, saying she was going to the movie theater with friends, and we dropped her off at the movie. And, Mama's had this little thing back there. And something said, you need to go into the movie. And so I waited till she got in. I waited about 15 minutes. I went in behind her, and she and her little girlfriends had set up these little dates with these little boys.
Oh, my goodness.
I busted that up right then.
But what if I say to you, there are so many more pressures today, like social media?
We had pressures, too.
Oh.
We had pressures, too. And the problem is parents allow, and my friends say I'm very old-fashioned. Claire did not get a cell phone until she could help pay for it. She was in that generation. And what's interesting, she is not on social media because she saw what happened to some of her friends who got on social media. I find it fascinating that now there's a lawsuit going on saying that, people on social media, these social media companies have not watched what's there, and so young children.
Very true.
Well, what happened to mom and daddy making sure why they got social
They're on
media
TikTok
at all?
too.
Yeah.
My daughter joked with me and said, why are all of the old people on TikTok now? So she and her friends are not on TikTok anymore because there are too many older people on TikTok.
Yes.
They've taken over the platform.
And so it's the same way with Facebook. It's old people. But my concern is, if your child is watching this stuff, how are they watching it? Because you gave them the phone to do it. You have to govern what your children are watching. When was the last time parents sat down and watched a TV program with their children and told them what they saw on the TV was not accurate? Or, here's why that's not a good story. Here's why this doesn't happen in real life. We don't spend the time governing our children the way my mom and probably your mom.
Absolutely.
They knew all your friends. They knew where you were. There was no such thing as privacy. If you go lock your door, we're going to take the door off the hinges.
There were no locked doors.
Hello?
No, please.
People don't do that anymore because they're afraid of alienating their children. Your children are not your friends. You're supposed to be raising them.
Absolutely.
So don't give me, you see, I go off on a tangent on that. I have no patience with parents who say, oh, I can't believe she said that to me. Excuse me?
But this part of you is, I think, what we've learned to love. It is, you brought this to journalism. You brought this to journalism. Your concern, your care about society is really, it was infectious. It's very clear that you care about it.
I care because I see far too often, and okay, I worry about our black boys more than anything. I worry about our girls. But I see, if you look at the history of what's happened in this country with black men, you know, from the time we were separated when we were brought to this country, families were separated. Men could never be the man of the family. We had to learn that. And now we have so many men who are incarcerated.
So many.
And then there's the drug culture, and then there's the gun culture. And there's not the emphasis on education anymore the way it used to be for black men. Now, we'll educate a black woman up and down, but we don't press upon our black men that you're going to be the head of the family. You need to get the education to get the kind of job you really, really want to make the money to make your life as comfortable as you want it to be. And it's not by selling drugs. It's not by being in a gang. We haven't taught the value of work. Everybody starts out making a little money, but if you get good at it, you can make a lot of money. And somewhere along the line, we've lost that hands-on. That's the reason why I like groups like 100 Black Men. And the groups that say, we're gonna mentor you, but we're gonna do more than mentor you. We're gonna be there for you. So if something comes up where you feel threatened, call me. If something comes up where someone's trying to recruit you, I'm there for you. We now have, these people are trying to have relationships with young black men that will keep them safe. I am so tired of seeing black faces on the news of black men either dying or killing.
It's happening far, far too often.
And it's scary.
It is scary.
We're killing ourselves.
It is scary. So it just brings up a name, Tyree Nichols.
Oh, that broke my heart. Because if there had not been cameras, we would never known what happened.
We'd have never
I am
known.
so glad the one officer forgot to turn off his camera, his body cam. I'm so glad. But I'm also glad for that camera that was up
Because
top.
that showed the real,
That showed
the real
the
deal.
real deal. But what was most hurtful about it, that these were black men beating another black man the way we normally see white police officers. How can you do that to one another? And then it hit me. My husband, John, said to me, well, Monica, you got to remember there's a culture of policing. And when you become a part of that police department, sometimes people forget they're black or Hispanic or Asian. They buy into the culture of policing. And the culture of policing is that a black man, if you see him out, he's doing something wrong. He's not doing anything right. So when you, even though you're black, you buy into that culture and you create what we saw on camera.
So it's not as black and white as it seems.
No, it's not as black and white as it seems. It's policing that's the problem. And black men forgetting who they are. And that's what those police officers did.
And so few people telling them who they are.
Yeah.
So with social media now accompanying these news stories, it's very difficult. It's difficult to be objective to begin with.
Yes.
But now that you have this following of people, this mass following of people, sharing it on social media, their thoughts, sharing the rumors, what is it like now, telling a news story objectively?
I have no idea because I don't do it. I am strictly personality interviews. But if I were doing it, I don't pay attention to social media, and you check every source. You check every source because in the end, it's my reputation that's on the line.
Absolutely.
So it may be on social media, but unless you can go check and see, is it true that these men were members of a certain fraternity and they have been expelled from that fraternity, you don't go with it unless you know it's true.
So you can't just report on it.
No, you cannot. People say, I read it on Facebook. That doesn't mean it's real.
I don't understand why we think that makes it credible. I saw it on TikTok.
Because this generation, those people who are in their 20s and 30s now, don't read the newspaper, except if it's on their phone. And they get their information from social media and forget that you have to check. Now, one thing about social media, it has brought to light stories that may have been swept under the rug in the past. So that's good. But you still have to verify everything that's said.
You said regarding Mary Frances that she put up with so that
we could
this
take
generation
advantage of.
can take
Yeah.
advantage of. Expound.
It's, Mary Frances was there, and I think of all those people I grew up with who were denied so many things. I can remember being measured for clothes in a department store because they wouldn't let us try them on. But with Mary Frances and with Hamilton Holmes and with Charlene Hunter Galt, people are throwing things at you while you're going to school. People are trying to keep you from learning. And in Mary Frances's case, she kept focus on, I'm here to graduate, because when I graduate, there will be other students like me who will come in here and make a difference. And now she has a college named after her, but when you look at the representation of the number of black people on the staff there, it's changed. And it all changed because 3 young black people took their lives, put it on the line, so that the door would be open for all of us. And I look back to Low Jelks going on TV in 1968, having to cover Klan rallies, being black, putting his life on the line, and doing well enough so it opened the door for a Jocelyn. Jocelyn opened the door for me. And when I went on the air, within 3 years, every TV station in Atlanta had added a black woman to their newscast at 6 o'clock.
Wow. So representation is vital.
I always tell my kids, I don't know who said it originally, if you can see it, you can be it. Representation is everything. And it's good for white students too. I've had so many students who will come up to me and give me a hug and say, I watched you, I wanted to be you growing up. And it's not a black child, it's a white child. Because what they saw was someone doing something they want to do and that they knew they could do.
And it's very hard for the,
It's to me, it's important. If I don't have any legacy, it's that. Telling kids you can be anything you want to be. What Hattie said is what you do, what you have that makes you what you are. You just have to do the work.
It's hard for the trailblazers, but it's important that, as you said in that lecture, that you put up with so that someone else can take advantage of.
And she did. I mean, Mary Frances at 86 is still very, how shall I say, outspoken. And she told the story, when they threw rocks at her, she picked up rocks and threw them back.
Wow.
She's feisty. But again, she knew it wasn't about her. I always say, I am living my grandmother's dreams. And it's true. People literally dreamed of where we are now. I mean, how many of your people in your family have PhDs?
On my mother's side and my father's side, I'm one of the first to have a terminal degree. In fact, I am one of the first to have a higher ranking position in a university. So I've blazed many trails. Absolutely.
Still making history in your own family. But that's lighting the way for somebody else who says in your family, well, if she did it, I can do it. You're providing them with encouragement. What's my phrase? I think that my husband actually got this from Dr. Rodney. How many books are there in the Bible?
66 canonized, but there's so many more.
Yeah, 66 canonized, but there are actually 67.
Oh.
You know why?
Why is that?
It's the Bible of you. People may not read the 66 books in the Bible. They may not even read Genesis, Exodus, or Matthew, Mark, but they see you. You're the Bible they read from what you do. True. Yet you do more for teaching about Christianity and God from the way you live your life.
Wow.
You're the 67th book of the Bible. All of us are.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is the absolute truth. It's just, you live it, you teach it, you show it in everything that you do and in your leadership style.
Yeah.
So,
and people need to know, to be a leader, they think, oh, you have to be. I tell kids all the time, you can start being a leader in your class. You can tutor somebody else. If you're good at math and you know somebody else in your class who's not, take that leadership role and say, hey, can I help you? And then help them. Leadership, you build it in increments. And leaders, good leaders, really have to learn how to develop other leaders. Leaders have to learn how to delegate. You can't hold everything to yourself. And leaders have to know when to go. When I retired, I had to decide, when am I going to retire? Am I going to stay to 40 years or am I going to do 37? If I had stayed to 40, Jovita Moore never would have had the opportunity to become the prime anchor. You have to know when to go, and you have to develop people to take your place. And oftentimes we hold on to things.
Yes.
We don't want to let it go, and you strangle it. You kill it. You've got to be able to let go.
And see yourself in a different light.
Yeah.
You use this term in an interview with Karen Greer. You use the term rewirement.
I am rewired. Rewired. I do not call myself retired. I call myself rewired. And rewirement means doing things that I love to do and not doing things I don't have to do. It means developing a new me. I call myself the Madonna of broadcast news. I change. I'm a chameleon. I do what I want to do to make me happy.
That's very freeing.
Yeah,
because
it is freeing.
we're used in different ways in different times of our lives.
Yes.
And I think if we see we don't have to hold so tightly to one role, one thing for so long.
Yes.
If we can see it in
Yes.
that way.
And now I'm working towards, eventually, when I finish doing the interview shows, I want to do strictly voiceover work, because I can do that in my pajamas at home, and speeches. That's it. That's all I want to do.
Did you feel any pressure, being one of the first, to bring everybody else along with you? Did you feel that pressure at all? You
Never
didn't?
did.
Okay.
All I felt, if somebody, and I still do it, if someone needs mentoring and they call me, I help them. But my thing was, I want to do well enough that they will open the door for somebody else to come in.
What do you mean by that?
By that, I mean, if I had not been good at what I did on the air and been involved in the community the way I was and was successful in the ratings, then the next black woman would not have been put into that position. So when I proved it could be done and that the audience liked me and would watch me and that the numbers went up rather than down, and I still say it's because I was in the community,
Yes.
not just what I did on the air, then there was like, oh, well, why don't we try her? And now I look at Portia Bruner on Fox 5. She's doing her own talk show now. That's going to open the door for someone else. Do you know how long it's been since a black woman had a talk show just by herself? It was when Billie Aaron was a young woman here.
Wow.
It's taken this long to finally get someone doing that locally. We've always had Oprah nationally and, those, but locally. And that's going to open up the door for someone else.
Before I forget, and I want to go back to that point. I want you to tell your Oprah story. Please tell your Oprah story.
It's really funny. I didn't learn until years later that there were 3 people who were the finalists for the job for the 6 o'clock news.
Yes.
Jane Pauley, Oprah Winfrey, and me. Now, I always say, I wonder if I hadn't gotten the job where I would be. But what gets me, every time I would interview Oprah or even see her, she will say, I can't believe you got my job. Now, mind you, she is Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
But she is so competitive that she will not let me live down the fact that I beat her out of a job. I think that is the funniest thing in the world.
It is very funny.
But it just shows who she is. She's very competitive.
So you're our Oprah, right here.
No,
But
I'm Monica.
Yes,
I'm
indeed.
Monica. We have a lot in common, but I always tell people you don't want to be like anybody else. You want to get to be the very best at being you.
How did you get that? How does that come about for you? Because we have leaders who are watching others and who do want to imitate and be there, and that's okay. A part of that's okay.
Right.
But there's something about you that's very special because God gave each of us something very, very special. How were you able to tap into that for yourself? That
My
it may
mama.
help someone.
My mama, because, okay, another Hattieism. If you is who you ain't, then you ain't who you is.
I love that. That's a good one. That's my favorite.
If you is who you ain't, then you ain't who you is. And she told me when I came down here, she said, you got to be you on TV. She said, don't try to be anybody else. And like for the first 6 months, I was trying to be like John Pruitt, sitting there with my little bow tie. And my mom came down here and she saw me. She said, that ain't Monty. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, you are trying to act like the guys. You got to be yourself. Let people see who you are. He said, you're sitting there like you got a stiff board. She said, loosen up. Be Monty. And so I took the chance. And it was the best I ever got. If you is who you ain't, then you ain't who you is. And I'm the same off the air as I am on the air.
You are.
And
you absolutely
you know
are.
what? It's too hard to be two different people. You might forget who that other person is.
He or she will come out.
Yes. So if you is who you ain't, then you ain't who you is.
Yes. And we love who you are. We don't need Oprah. We have Monica.
Thank you.
And we're very, very grateful for that. For leaders who are coming up today, they have so many things that they're struggling with in their identity, and they're trying to push forward in so many different ways. What are some important qualities, leadership qualities, that they should be working on to develop, to compete in this manic world?
Well, I think you said it earlier. It really is that you really need to know who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And are those weaknesses ones you want to change? Vulnerabilities are sometimes good things because you have a sensitivity that is needed to be vulnerable. That can pay off in the workplace if you're in the right position. I think leaders today, you can have role models, but I don't think you want to duplicate those role models. I think you want to look at what's there and how can you make it work for you. Again, you're looking at them, but you take away from it and then you apply it to you. Does it work for you? I'll give you an example. Mark Winnie is an excellent reporter, but he does this kind of Dick Tracy talk and he's got his shirt hanging out his back. That's the kind of investigative reporter he does. But then you have someone else like Richard Belcher, who is very stoic and comes at you a different way. Both of them are leaders when it comes to reporting on investigative pieces. One does it his way, the other does it his way, but they both tell you the story in a way that is compelling. Again, you've got to be the best at being you. I would tell leaders always to continue to get educated. If you just sit there and this is the way we did it 10 years ago, this is the way I learned it, this is the way it ought to be, then you're not much of a leader. Because leadership changes.
It absolutely does.
Leadership changes. And the only way you're going to keep up with it is by going to school or reading or being involved in organizations that will help you to continue to grow. That was the best thing for me by going to grad school. Had I gone to grad school earlier, I would have been an even better reporter than I was, because I came face to face with some biases I didn't know I had.
For instance?
For instance, I came from a family where I got my education, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and I couldn't understand why some people in public housing couldn't do it. Well, think about it, Monica. If you're 3 generations on welfare and you don't have an example to do better, how are you going to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? What if there's no bus to get you to the school where you need to go? What if you're hungry? So I had to start thinking about the things I said or thought that were biased.
Because our biases cause us to make assumptions about others that aren't fair.
That are not fair. Exactly. And that's what grad school did for me, because I was in there with some younger people who would question you about those things when you said them. Whereas in my age group, it's kind of like, yeah, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can make it. And it's like, no, not everybody has bootstraps. Not everybody has shoes.
Wow.
So I like that. That's the reason why I keep younger people around me now. I have friends who are my age, I have friends who are older, and I have friends who are much younger, because it keeps me sharp.
Yeah, it really does.
It does.
It keeps you fresh.
And that's what a leader needs to do. If you have people around you who are yes, 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 you're never going to grow. And you're going to get into a rut, and a rut that will do harm to wherever you're working, whatever you're doing.
Because younger people they're so quick to tell you, they'll tell you the absolute truth, and things change so quickly for them.
Yes.
And it's helpful for us because we can tend to get stuck
Yeah.
in one thing, but they're constantly changing, constantly moving, but we can balance that off for them.
That's what I was getting ready to
Yeah.
say, because they need our balance, and they need our experience, and they need our wisdom. You have to find that happy medium. I will tell you, there's one thing I will not do. When
What's that?
someone asks me to mentor them, and they ask me, literally, what are the steps I need to follow? And I look at their videos and I tell them how I feel. And then they send me a video a month later and they're still doing the same thing that I told them not to do. That's the end of it. Hard head makes for a soft behind. as
So
my
you have
mama used to say.
little
I
tolerance
have
for
no
the not
tolerance.
listening.
I have no tolerance. None, absolutely none.
Because if they came to you for the advice.
Don't waste my time.
So, you indicate in your lecture that there's still more work to be done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's still. What more would you like to see, particularly for African American women? What more
Yes.
would you like to see
Yes,
happen
yes,
in
yes.
journalism for them?
In journalism, I would like to see more of us stop being on camera and to be in positions of management. I want to see more black women in positions as news directors, executive producers. I want to see more black women owning radio stations and TV stations. Far too many women are on the news. I don't make decisions about what goes on the air. The news director does. The assistant news director. I don't hire and fire. The general manager does. The news director. I'd like to see more women going into sales. That's where you make the most money. And you determine what commercials go on the air. So I would like to stop black women from always saying, oh, they told me I have a pretty face and a nice figure and I dress well and I have a good voice, so I should be a reporter. No. Look at where your gifts are. Management means everything. The president of ABC News is a black woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So that gives me joy. She got the message early on that the power is in management and not on the air.
That is so, so critical because we gravitate quickly to those visual roles that we assume that's where the power is, but it's not. And that's in many industries. So the power is not in the person that's in the front performing, but it's the persons that are
Behind
willing
the
and dealing
scenes, yes.
behind the scenes. That's
And
a game
what I
changer.
want. That's what I really want, is to see more of our young women doing that. But the problem is everybody tells them, oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you dress so well. Oh, you have a great voice. And they don't think about that's just window dressing. You want to be behind the scenes where the decisions are made.
Where policies are changed.
Yeah.
That's so important. How do we help them make the shift?
Well, that's, as I said, with Ms. Godwin being the president of ABC News, letting them know that position exists and telling them you can do this too. And saying to someone who's going to school for journalism or mass communication, why don't you look into management? Why don't you look into producing? Why do you think you have to be on the air? And explain to them how a newsroom works and who makes the decisions.
Or where the real money is.
And sales is everything. Sales is really everything.
Say more about that because people shun sales, but everything is sales.
No, everything is sales. And what normally, if you come up through the sales and become sales manager, eventually you can be the general manager of a TV station where you're over everything.
And that's entry door sales.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have to expand our mind and expand our vision. And I always tell people, interview the companies the way they interview you. Because you want to know, where am I going to be in 5 years? What is my upward mobility? It's not always about money. It's about succession. It's about leadership. It's about growth. And, we just say, oh, they're going to pay me well, and I'm going to do this. But if you're going to be sitting there 20 years from now doing the same thing, now, if that's what you want to do, fine. But if you're one of those little eager beavers who wants to move up the ladder, you either have to move to another city, and that's the other thing people forget. In order to make it big in our business, to get to network, you have to move more than once.
You have to be willing to go.
You have to be willing to go, and that's hard if you want to have a family.
There are a lot of sacrifices. I mean, people,
in any career, there are a lot of sacrifices, and that's the reason you should interview the job the way they interview you. And I always tell my kids, do the research on the position, talk to people who are in the position, and ask them real life questions, not just how many hours do you work, how much do you get paid. Ask those questions about what has this job cost you.
Because you may not even want it. Once you find all of it out, it may not fit the life that you desire for yourself.
But we never ask those real questions of people. We just do the window dressing questions. You need to really ask you, what does this job cost you?
You are just a walking bit of experience. Every interview just spills out your experience.
I'm 75. I ought to have some experience by now.
But meaningfully.
Well, I hope so.
Meaningfully, what you've shared just by your example for us today, and all that you've done. But is there anything that we can't find in the digital archives about Monica that you would love for us to know? Something that adds to your leadership profile.
Ooh, that adds to my leadership profile. Yes, there is something you probably don't know. I always talked about I want to be a teacher, but what I really wanted to be was a jazz singer. But because I was the first person in my family to go to college, it was incumbent upon me to make money. And singing was not guaranteed, meaning maybe I would have won a Grammy, maybe I would not have won a Grammy. I could not go with what I really wanted to do, because I felt I owed it to my mother and my grandmother to go to college, get a good job, buy a house, and be responsible. Being a jazz singer would not be responsible. Singing in clubs, having a part-time job, maybe working as a waitress, and not doing what my family wanted me to do.
Do you think you played it safe?
It was not playing it safe. It was playing it responsible.
But look where it led.
Yeah.
I mean, it led to some pretty amazing places.
And when I still get my little opportunities to sing, and now I know I never would have been, Dinah Washington or Whitney Houston. But at that time in my life, that was something I really wanted to do.
Well, how did you get into singing country? Was it because of Kentucky?
Yeah, Hayloft Hoedown.
Okay. Yes.
And when I was on that show. But that's something I really wanted to do. And that was one of those things that I always regretted that I didn't do. But in the end, I did what was best for my family. That was my sacrifice.
But would you tell someone else to go for it? Would you give them?
Depends. It really does.
Yeah.
If they have a degree in something they can make a living in the daytime, and can sing and play music at night, I would say do it. But if this is a high school student coming right out of school, no, I would not, because you can't take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the only thing. I regret I didn't become a jazz singer.
And I can hear it.
Well, it's so funny. My mother said when I was born, and they popped me on the behind, that when I cried, she literally sat up and said, "What's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with her voice?" I've always had a low voice. And so I was a contralto, an alto, tenor, never been a soprano.
Wow. Monica, I am just in awe of your stories, of your unique gift, of your unique way of being who you are, boldly standing in who you are. Your representation matters. It continues to matter. We can now find you, though, doing what you love.
Yes, on Peachtree TV.
Yes.
The last Sunday of every month, doing my interview shows. And I've been told, newsflash, they're going to start running the old ones so that I'll be on every week starting in April. Every Sunday, so that'll be fun.
A lot of our younger people you can go to YouTube and get all of it. I saw the recent one with that you did I think 4 months ago, Ryan Cameron.
Yes,
I loved it.
Now you know what my favorite one is.
What's that?
Young Jock.
I haven't seen that one.
When you see that one, you're going to call me.
How long ago was this?
When did I do Young Jock? I can't remember. You will see a side of me that is very, very different.
Okay. I look forward
Young
to
Jock actually played along with me. And I'll just say that.
Okay.
And it has to do with something he had done to his body. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I look forward to it. Young Jock is one of those people. Well, leave us with this.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a cautionary tale or word of advice for aspiring journalists or leaders in any field?
Yes.
What would it be?
Never say anything around a microphone you wouldn't want your mother to hear.
Oh, my.
When I was anchor in Louisville, Kentucky, during a commercial break, there was a commercial for Does detergent with Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner. And I had a weatherman who liked to drink his lunch.
Okay.
And he saw Dolly Parton on camera during a commercial break, and he made a really obscene comment about Dolly Parton.
Yes.
And I said, "Oh, sugar honey iced tea, Bill, shut up." Everybody in Louisville, Kentucky, and southern Indiana heard me say the dirty word for feces on television.
Oh, my goodness.
Luckily, we wear IFBs and in our ears, and the director said, "Monica, your mic was open." I said, "Oh, no." So when we came back, I immediately apologized. If you heard any profanity, that's not the policy of WHAS TV, and I regret, and went on and did the show.
Ooh.
When I got off the air, there were 2 phone calls waiting for me.
Oh, my.
One was from my news director, who laughed his head off and said, "You had the good sense to apologize, and for that reason, you will not be suspended."
Okay.
The other was from Hattie. Monica Rosie Lee Jones Kaufman, my whole name.
You're full.
My full name. Why would you put something in your mouth you wouldn't hold in your hand? Slam! Never
Miss
say
Hattie
anything
did not play.
around a microphone you don't want your mother to hear. And that's really important these days because
It is.
microphones are everywhere. Video cameras are
Message.
everywhere.
Yes.
So the message is, ladies and gentlemen, employers look at social media. So you may be having a good time at a party, but don't do anything or put anything on social media you wouldn't want your boss or your future boss to see, because it all has a way of coming back on you. You've seen stories recently where
absolutely.
politicians did something in blackface years ago, and then it comes up on social media, and they have to apologize, and some of them have had to leave their position.
It doesn't even matter if they apologize.
No,
It's too
it
late.
doesn't. It's too late. So
And that means they have to start now, very young, to thinking about
yes.
that.
So I say all the time, never say anything around a microphone you wouldn't want your mother to hear.
That is sage advice. Sage advice. Please listen to that. You know, I cannot thank you enough. We at BHU cannot thank you enough. But one of the ways we want to thank you, because I know there is a place that is near and dear to your heart, and I'm speaking of Presentation Academy.
Yes.
So on behalf of President Benzin Karanja and all of us here at BHU, we would like to make a donation to your academy. I know that it's your prize high school, and we want to continue to support that because I believe you continue to do so.
I do. I have a scholarship for girls from single-family homes, single-parent homes.
Wow.
Because my mother used to, I don't have it on today because I'm wearing this, but I usually wear my mother's engagement ring because she used to pawn it to pay my tuition at that school. Because education was that important to her. She would literally pawn it and pay my tuition in September. She would get it out in usually, I think June.
So she did that
July,
ongoingly?
Ongoing to pay my tuition to an all-girls Catholic high school.
in Louisville, Kentucky, by the name of
So,
Presentation.
so I still am very involved there, and some of my girls have already graduated. I'm really big on education. So I've set up a scholarship fund there. I set up one at UGA through Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority for girls there, and then I have one set up at the University of Louisville for young women too.
Well, we want to dedicate
Thank
back
you.
to that in
Thank
your
you
honor
so
because we know it
much.
means a lot to you.
It does.
And education, of course, means a lot to us. And we want to just keep it going and keep our representatives strong, fresh, and educated.
And can I say thank you? Because my husband is now working on his master's here. At
Yay!
Beulah. Yeah. I'm so
Absolutely.
proud of him.
We're glad to have John here.
And
yes.
you know, I spoke here, how many years ago was it? Oh, goodness. I spoke here several years ago at a graduation.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
was at a graduation.
You were a keynote speaker.
So Beulah Heights is very much a part of my family.
We're very glad. We're glad, and you're etched in our hearts. And this time with us it means the world. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Plant.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have been tremendously blessed with Mrs. Monica Pearson. She's shared wonderful stories and some wonderful advice. So until next time, let's continue to talk about leadership and to be leaders in everything that we do. Bye now.